David Ignatius is here. He is an associate editor and columnist for the Washington Post. He has also covered the Middle East, the CIA, and foreign policy for more than 25 years for various newspapers. He's also a best-selling novelist. The latest book is called The Director. The spy novel draws on the history of American intelligence and also on hacking and what it portends for the future of intelligence. I'm pleased to have David Ignatius back at this table. Welcome.
Thank you, Charlie.
How do you do it, is my question. How do you do it? This is number 9?
This is my ninth novel.
Ninth novel.
The simple answer is that this is pleasure. This is my hobby. I love writing fiction because it's relaxing. I get lost in a book when I'm writing it.
But can you tell stories here that you couldn't write about because you couldn't nail it down for reporting, but you can, with a pretty sure instinct, believe it's the way things are?
You can take things that you learn as a journalist and then begin to speculate about them and draw them out and imagine how they might work. And as a journalist, I don't really see into the details of intelligence operations. I see the surface. I learn. People tell me stories.
But you're wired. Come on, you're wired.
Okay, so I hear a lot, but I'm not on the inside of this world. So in a sense, that makes it easier because I can imagine whole parts of it, and describe what people might do and operations that the agency might plan.
How many of the characters, like the director here, are based in some sense on a profile of someone you know?
Every character, they're all composites. There's no characters based on a single person. I don't think that would work.
Yeah, but I just said to you, I love Ramona, and you said you may know her.
Well, I was with any character. Ramona Kyle is a character in this book, and they're people
sexy.
Who are like the character, and you may know some of them. And but there's no, honestly, Charlie. If you try to describe a real person, it would be nonfiction. It would be journalism. It's the invention that makes it seem
but you're
real.
Inspired by things you see.
Yeah, sure.
I mean, I would assume, and tell me if I'm wrong, because I haven't written 9 books. I would assume that as you go through your life on a plane going to a foreign country to report and interview people, you're meeting people along the way. You're hearing stories along the way, and all those stories are filed in your brain and in your computer, saying this just may be part of something.
For sure. There are little bits of real life just stick in your consciousness and then get you going. I'll give you a good example. When I was researching The Director, I got started back in 2012 with this idea that hacking, the intersection, the collision of hacking and intelligence was really interesting. So I decided...
That's what Edward Snowden said.
Well, did he ever? So I decided that I needed to find out about this world. So I went to the biggest hackers convention. Believe it or not, hackers have a convention every year in Las Vegas.
It's called DEF something?
It's called DEF CON, exactly. Right. And I went there. There are 10,000 or more people, dressed in black T-shirts and jeans and spiky hair.
Right.
And, I had somebody who guided me around and introduced me to people. But as I met those people, they began to stick to my consciousness. So they come back out in fiction. Is anybody any particular person? No.
Okay.
But am I drawing on the real life that I saw? Absolutely. And I think that's what makes this kind of book that purports to be kind of real life espionage fiction seem interesting for people.
So tell me who Graham Webber is, and tell me who James Morris is. Not in terms of some character you model them on, but who they are in this book.
In the book, Graham Webber is the head of a big communications company on the West Coast. Right. He's a very iconoclastic guy. He's refused a national security letter from the FBI. The FBI told him to produce information, and he said, "No, I won't do it. I don't think it's constitutional. I challenge this." So he's kind of a hero to people on the left who would like to see the CIA reformed. It comes to the attention of the president. The president likes him and decides he wants to shake up the CIA, so he's installed as the director of the CIA. In his first week on the job, into the American consulate in Hamburg walks a scruffy hacker, a Swiss kid, who tells the CIA base chief in Hamburg, "You have been hacked." we are inside your computers. We know your communication system, and to prove it, gives the base chief a list of all the officers from the agency in Germany and Switzerland.
The worst fear that you can deliver to a station
The worst
chief.
thing that could happen to the agency seems to be happening to this director in his first week. He has no idea what to do. It's a completely new world to him. He has met James Morris. He began by reading about James Morris's accompanying the director to this hackers convention where he acts as his guide and kind of, amanuensis.
Right.
And so he turns to him, smart young kid, and says, "Help me. I'm going to send you to Hamburg to try to unravel this terrible mystery of us being hacked. You're a hacker." His nickname in the Internet Operations Division at the CIA is Ponzer, which in hackerese means "we own you." And so he's sent out to try to own this problem for the director. As readers will discover in the book, James Morris turns out to be a very complicated person, and he has multiple agendas going, none of which are clear to the director, and he gets the director into the kind of nightmarish problem that American national security agencies, the NSA, have been experiencing over the last couple of years. I like to say this is a post-Snowden novel in the sense that my characters are fictional, but they live in a world after Edward Snowden has revealed these secrets. And really, this book is in part about the tools that NSA developed being turned back against the CIA, and the CIA being under threat from the same kinds of aggressive operations it conducted against others.
What are you saying about the CIA in this book?
I'm saying that the CIA is inhabited by ghosts. That's something that the president says to Graham Weber when he selects him as director. And everything Weber encounters as he arrives at the agency confirms it. One of the first things he does, Charlie, is he decides he's going to remove the statue of Wild Bill Donovan, the CIA's famous founder. There's a statue in the lobby.
Yeah.
Donovan has got his fingers in his belt and looking
the man who ran
like
OSS during World War II.
He ran OSS and is seen as the founder, and Weber's first act is to get that statue out of the lobby. And there's a big discolored spot, and the employees all look, what's happened? Where's Wild Bill Donovan? And this is his way of saying, we have to shake this place up. These ghosts that inhabit the agency this way, in which we're tied to a past that isn't fully ours, has to end.
Does this reflect your views about the present CIA?
It does. I think, Charlie, if you look at I've written now 9 novels about the CIA. If you look at the arc of those books, you see an agency that went from its great days when it had the wind at its back. My first novel was set in 1970 is when it begins, when everybody wanted to be a CIA agent. I mean, you were nobody in Beirut if the CIA hadn't recruited you to be somebody. Yeah. You want to be on America's payroll. To today, where in so many places around the world, the United States is hated, is rejected. And the agency suffers from that. I think the agency has gotten too big. It's too bureaucratic. The combination of bureaucracy and secrecy at the CIA has produced a special kind of disaster. And so I'd like to see a smaller CIA. I'd like to see it focus more on the secrets that really matter. I'd like to see it get out of the covert action paramilitary side of the business. One of the things I really liked about President Obama's speech at West Point was he was suggesting that in these future counterterrorism training missions we're going to do in Syria, Iraq, elsewhere, the training should be done by military people, by special operations forces.
Well, the mission that got Osama bin Laden was conceived by the CIA, but run by special operations.
Yes. So it was a Title 50 mission, which meant the CIA ran it. It was officially deniable. It was a covert action. Under Title 10, which is the authority under which our uniformed military operates, you can't do these deniable covert things. Militaries have to go in uniform, they have to declare their presence, etc. special operations officers from Delta Force or SEALs can be cut to, detached to the CIA, where the same
carry
people,
out a CIA mission.
Yes, but they then are working for the CIA, and as they say in the jargon, they're operating under Title 50 authority. So that's the training program that we are doing now of Syrian opposition forces.
Yeah, exactly. It's CIA.
Is a CIA program. It's run by CIA paramilitary officers. Some of them are Army and probably SEAL Special Forces. The idea of...
They're carrying this out in Jordan or in Syria?
The principal training camp is in Jordan. No, they don't go into Syria.
They don't go into Syria.
The idea that President Obama is playing with, and I think it's a good one, is let's make this more overt. And the idea of calling it a covert action when we're writing about it in the newspaper every other day is ridiculous. So,
now, let's
do it with the military. Let's make it a Title 10 program. And I think Obama's got the support of the chairman of the Joint Chiefs, General Marty Dempsey, which is a big change because he was against this sort of thing before. So I think that's where they're going.
Now, here's what's interesting. When David Petraeus became CIA director, people assumed that it would be more of a paramilitary role for the CIA. Then when, as I understand it, I'm asking you, the understander of all, when John Brennan became the CIA director, he basically said, I don't think we ought to be doing that. I want us to go back to our core mission of finding secrets.
I think that's...
Am I right about that?
I think the basic parameters of that are right. Petraeus never went as far in the paramilitary direction as people expected that he might. And Brennan has understood that the CIA's counterterrorism mission, which is what runs the drone program and other counterterrorism efforts, is so
which is now run by the Army, isn't it? I mean, the military.
No,
the drone mission is now run by.
In Pakistan, where we have not conducted many drone attacks, I don't think we've conducted any this year, but I believe it's still run by the CIA.
Because I thought,
and in Yemen, which is the other major theater for where drones are used, the idea was to turn it over to the military, but some early military operations didn't go well, and there were terrible civilian casualties. And it's my understanding, this kind of thing we never really know, but it's my understanding it was handed back, at least temporarily, to the agency.
Talk to me about Snowden, and I mean, you know this world, and you know this stuff. What did you think of this interview with Brian Williams?
You know, I thought it was fascinating. First of all, because it was almost as if he was opening plea negotiations with the government.
Yeah,
I
want to go home.
He was saying, "I want to go home. I'm a patriot. He was saying, I'm willing to." If I understood him, I'm willing to plead to reduce charges. I might be willing to serve a short prison sentence. I'd have to read the text carefully. But that was what I took away from it. I thought the second thing that was fascinating was that he wanted people to understand that he had been a significant intelligence officer. He hadn't just been a low-level technician. No, I was trained as a CIA undercover officer. I was undercover with the NSA.
Saw Susan Rice say that's BS.
I heard Susan say that was false. And another important statement he made in that interview, which was that he had tried to blow the whistle through channels at the NSA, had written to the General Counsel and others at the NSA. Just this afternoon, the NSA released what they said was the text of the letter that he had sent, which is different from what he had described. It's a much more technical and limited. It's not a kind of whistleblowing, angry, this is unconstitutional and outrageous, and I, as an American citizen, protest it. It's something.
But he seems to believe that it hasn't done any damage, and certainly nobody has hurt. And I've had Susan Rice and John Kerry and half a dozen other people say, former CIA directors say, that's just simply not true. What do you say?
What I say first is that it's hard for me to see Edward Snowden as a hero. He signed an agreement. He had some of the government's most precious secrets. He signed an agreement to protect them, and he disclosed them. It's very difficult today to know what the benefits and what the costs of what he did are. some benefits are clear. There has been a debate about surveillance that's led to new legislation, which I think is going to get passed by both houses and signed by the president, that will allow us to experiment with a much less intrusive kind of surveillance, where the phone companies hold our metadata for a year to 2 years instead of NSA for 5 years, and it's much harder. You query it through specific court orders, and that's that's good. It's worth trying that. And I think we ought to look for several years and see, is it possible, contrary to what the NSA has been saying, to protect the country and respect people's privacy more. And if it works, then I would say let's go further. Let's have additional reforms. But so I think that's that experiment to see how we can do things in ways that are more respectful of privacy. That's obviously a good thing. The damage that Susan talked about, others have talked about, the systems that cost billions of dollars to create that have been compromised. There's just no way for me as a journalist outside this to know. I've heard the assertions over and over again. Certainly I know from traveling that in terms of public opinions about America overseas, it's been very damaging. It's the first thing people want to talk to when I meet with them, and they're angry. And so, you could say we had it coming. We should have been doing these things in the first place. Certainly with something like listening to Angela Merkel, the German Chancellor's phone calls, that's true. This Snowden period has really been a difficult one for the government, and you just have to hope that for the country, for us as citizens, the benefits are going to end up being greater than the costs.
Speaking of U.S. foreign policy and President Obama, you said, quote, this was about a month ago, U.S. foreign policy has suffered real reputational damage. This damage, unfortunately, has largely been self-inflicted by an administration that focuses too much on short-term messaging at key turning points in Egypt and Libya during the Arab Spring, in Syria and Ukraine, and yes, in Benghazi. The administration was driven by messaging priorities rather than sound interest-based policy.
Well, I'm glad you quoted that, because it's a tough statement, but it's one that I really do believe. We have suffered reputational damage. Everywhere I go, and I bet you'd say the same thing, I hear people say, your government is in retreat. The United States is a weaker power than it was. We need more leadership than we're getting from President Obama. And, that hurts us. It's damaging to the United States to be seen as vacillating. When The Economist runs a cover with the words, "What would America fight for?"
I did a whole show on that.
That's reputational damage right there. I mean, the cost in lost credibility is significant. I think when President Obama gives a speech like the one he gave at West Point, which I thought was generally a good speech.
Did it answer the critics, you think?
Not totally, but it began to. When Susan Rice comes on your show and tries to speak carefully and seriously about foreign policy, that helps. I would say that the outcome in Ukraine, as of this hour, shows that President Obama generally made good decisions, realizing that he didn't have military options. He chose other options, and in the end, Vladimir Putin, the Russian president, realized that he didn't want to invade Ukraine, and we had elections last Sunday, and they seem to have gone pretty well. But this White House is too focused on messaging, and it is too reactive and short-term. That's why the president's
messaging meaning, what do you mean by messaging?
I mean messaging in the sense that campaign professionals use that term during a political campaign. That you're messaging within the 24-hour cycle. That you want to make sure your message gets out.
But do you take that to Benghazi then, and all the controversy of Susan Rice and what she said and what memo might have been written?
I think Susan Rice
Ben Rhodes
gets unfairly criticized in this whole business. She basically just took the talking points that have been prepared by the CIA with an awful lot of input from the entire executive branch and went on TV and read them. What bothered me about this whole exercise was the sort of incredible, fastidious attention to every word in those talking points when the larger issue of Libya falling apart, the death of our brave ambassador, Chris Stevens, and 3 other people there, the question of how this security vacuum in Libya was going to be filled, the question of what policies the United States was going to develop to deal with a morphing al-Qaeda in North Africa and Syria. I mean, frankly, Charlie, at that time, heading toward the election, the Republicans are right in saying the administration wanted everybody to think al-Qaeda was finished.
Right.
It was over, and we now understand in 2014, the president put at the center of his speech at West Point the reality that al-Qaeda is still with us. It's a different kind of threat.
It's morphed into something else.
But it's morphed into something else, and that's the very issue the administration was trying so hard to deny after Benghazi. And so I think a lot of this Republican campaign is just silly. It's wasting the country's time. The basic issue of the administration thinking more about the message it wanted to convey than the policies that would really address the underlying problem, I think that is a fair criticism.
When you look at the president's policy with respect to China, do you think the Chinese, what's the relationship?
The first thing I'd say is that my impression is that the strongest leader in the world today is Chinese President Xi Jinping.
Right.
So I think the Obama administration has been trying to deal with the reality of this strong China and to balance its traditional alliance with Japan against the importance of having an open, productive relationship with China. I thought on the president's trip to Asia, he got that balance about right. He stood by the Japanese on the question of these disputed islands, but he also made clear that the United States wanted a negotiated resolution of this problem, and generally in the South China Sea and the East China Sea wanted to see a rules-based outcome rather than more Chinese belligerence. And I thought that was about the right place to be.
Are you at work on another book?
I'm in the stage of beginning
to think.
It's just what you said. So whenever I go anywhere, I think, oh, that's interesting. Because I'll make a little note.
So what is the first thing you look for? A central idea that will drive the book?
I try to think what the CIA is going to be dealing with a couple of years down the road at the time the book comes out. You mentioned a book I wrote called The Increment, which was about the Iranian nuclear program. So I got to thinking, what is it that the United States would be trying to do to disrupt this Iranian nuclear program along the way? And I got to thinking about supply chains and how you get inside those and penetrate those. And I began to think about computers the Chinese were using, and et cetera.
There you go.
A foreign
so
minister,
you in Shanghai looking at the possibility of your next book having a central theme about cyber.
It might have a little bit of Chinese cyber. But I had a foreign minister ask me after this Iran book came out. I won't identify the country, but he said, he was thinking of the Stuxnet virus, which is very real-life thing like
used against Iranians.
He said, David, how is it that you were cleared for something that I was not? I was very flattered by that. Obviously, not true. But so the fun of being a novelist, the fun of having the job that I do, is that you get to speculate. You get to think about where will things be 2 years from now. What will be the things that you, Charlie, will be doing programs about? And how can I try to write fiction that will be interwoven with that fact, with that real world, in a way that teases it out and lets you have some fun with it, think about it, reflect on it.
The book is called The Director by David Ignatius. This is the 9th, and you're already working on the 10th. It'll be based in China.
Thank you, Charlie.
Thank you, David.